At 4 o'clock, the unit changed character. The television went silent. Men returned to their assigned cells, and Officer Daniel Price walked the lower tier with a printed roster while another officer checked the upper level. Marcus stood beside his bunk when his cell number was called. "Read, Marcus." "Here." His voice was even. Across the narrow cell, his bunkmate, Leon Harris, a thin black man in his late 50s with reading glasses balanced low on his nose, glanced up from a paperback. "First count," Leon asked after the officers moved on. "First one here." "Then here is free advice. Count means stand where they can see you. Keep your identification card ready, and do not make Officer Price repeat himself." Marcus gave a small nod. "Sounds reasonable." Leon studied him for a second. Reasonable is valuable in here. When count cleared, doors opened and voices returned almost at once. The smell of institutional coffee mixed with disinfectant and reheated food drifting from the corridor beyond the unit. Marcus remembered the note waiting on the metal desk. He considered leaving it there, but avoiding the day room entirely would only postpone the conversation. He folded the paper into his pocket and walked downstairs. Wade Mercer was sitting at the same table with the same two men. Marcus noticed their names now because their identification cards were clipped where regulations required them. Wade. Nolan Briggs. Eric Danner. Wade pointed toward the empty chair. "See? Saved you a seat." Marcus remained standing. "You wanted to talk." Wade took a slow drink of coffee. "People need things in here. Coffee. Soap. Extra food. Somebody to make sure nobody bothers them. We keep things organized." "I already have soap." Nolan laughed once, but Wade did not. "You think I am selling soap? I think you are explaining your arrangement." Marcus kept his hands relaxed at his sides. "I am telling you I am not interested." Wade's expression tightened. "Everybody needs somebody." "Maybe." Marcus glanced toward the officer's station, then back at Wade. "But owing people I barely know is a bad way to introduce myself." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Marcus could hear sneakers squeaking on the polished floor near the telephone area. Wade leaned forward. "You always this careful?" "Usually." "What did you do before this?" Marcus looked at him. The question sounded casual, but it was not. "Worked." "Doing what?" "Different things." Wade smiled faintly. "That is not an answer." "It is the answer I am giving you." Marcus turned away before the exchange could become a performance for the room. At dinner, he carried his plastic tray to a table near Leon. The meal was turkey loaf, green beans, mashed potatoes, and a carton of 2% milk. Leon moved his paperback aside. "You disappointed Mercer." "I noticed. He likes knowing where people fit." Marcus opened the milk carton. "People are not filing cabinets." Leon almost smiled. Then his attention shifted toward Marcus's hands. "Military." Marcus looked up. "Why?" "You folded that blanket upstairs like it owed you money." Marcus gave the first genuine smile he had managed all day. "Navy." "How long?" "Long enough." Leon accepted the boundary without pushing. That mattered to Marcus. What Marcus did not explain was that the Navy had once been more than a job. It had given structure to a young man from Richmond's South Side who had grown up measuring household emergencies by whether his mother could cover them before payday. It had taught him patience before pressure, observation before reaction, and responsibility after mistakes. Some years had been spent aboard ships. Others belonged to work he rarely discussed, even with friends. He had eventually earned the trident of a Navy SEAL, but sitting beneath fluorescent lights with a state identification card clipped to his shirt, Marcus felt no desire to make that history his introduction. Whatever he had once been, he was here now. After dinner, he returned his tray and walked toward the stairs. Wade called after him. "Read." Marcus stopped. "Tomorrow, you might feel different." Marcus looked back. Wade was not smiling anymore. Marcus felt the familiar instinct to calculate possibilities, but he pushed it down. This place did not need another man trying to prove he was dangerous. "Tomorrow," Marcus said quietly, "I will still know who I am." Then he climbed the stairs, leaving Wade with an answer that revealed almost nothing and meant everything. The next morning began at 5:30 with fluorescent lights snapping on and Officer Price calling for breakfast movement. Marcus was already awake. He had slept lightly, waking whenever keys rattled beyond the door or voices traveled through the tier. Leon sat on the lower bunk, tying his state-issued shoes. "You sleep at all?" he asked. "Enough." "That means no." Marcus pulled on his tin uniform shirt. Leon gave him a knowing look, but left it there. In the chow hall, Marcus chose oatmeal, powdered eggs, toast, and black coffee. He sat with Leon near a wall where morning light entered through narrow windows. Halfway through breakfast, Leon quietly said, "Do not turn around." Marcus continued eating. Mercer, his friends, 2 tables back. Marcus lifted his coffee. "They have been watching since we came in." Leon lowered his voice. "Wade has been here for years. He has a little circle. Nothing official, no grand organization. Just men who figured out intimidation gets them favors." Marcus disliked the word intimidation less than what it suggested about the people targeted. Who do they usually bother? New arrivals. Quiet guys. Anybody they think will pay for peace. Marcus looked at Leon. And everybody accepts that? Leon stirred his oatmeal, although there was nothing left to stir. Everybody learns what problems they can afford. Marcus understood that answer better than he wanted to. After breakfast, the unit posted work and program assignments. Marcus had not yet received a permanent job, so he was directed to orientation in an education room beside the library. A case counselor named Ms. Alvarez explained mail procedures, commissary limits, medical requests, grievance forms, religious services, and how to request legal calls. Marcus listened carefully and wrote information on the small sheet provided. When she mentioned the law library, he raised his hand. "How soon can I request access?" "Submit the form today. Legal deadlines receive priority if documented." "Thank you." His appeal mattered more than Wade, pride, or whatever. Reputation men expected him to build inside cell block C. When orientation ended, Marcus returned through the corridor with 6 other new inmates. Near the unit entrance, an older inmate pushing a laundry cart stopped abruptly. Several folded uniforms slid onto the floor. Men walked around him. Marcus did not. He crouched and gathered the clothing before it could be stepped on. "You do not have to do that," the man said. "I know." Marcus placed the final shirt on the cart. The man studied him. "Name is Raymond." "Marcus." "I know." That answer stayed with Marcus as he entered the unit. News traveled quickly here. So did judgments. At midday, Marcus found a commissary request form on his desk. Someone had written coffee, soup, and stamps across it, then added a number beside each item. Leon saw it and sighed. "That is Wade's handwriting." Marcus examined the page. "He wants me to buy things for him. He wants to see whether you will." Marcus folded the form once. Then he is going to be disappointed twice. He carried it downstairs. Wade was near the television, talking with Nolan and Eric. Marcus stopped several feet away and held out the paper. "You left this upstairs." Wade did not take it. "That is your shopping list." "No, it is yours." A few nearby conversations softened. Marcus immediately wished they had not. Public attention turned small disagreements into contests. Wade looked around and seemed to notice the same thing. "You trying to embarrass me?" "No." Marcus placed the form on the empty table between them. "I am returning something that does not belong to me." Wade stood, but Marcus did not change his posture. "You think being calm makes you special?" Marcus looked directly at him. "No. I think being calm keeps simple things simple." Officer Price glanced over from the desk. Wade noticed. Whatever answer he had prepared remained unspoken. Marcus walked away and sat beside Leon near the windows. His heartbeat was steady, but he knew the pressure was changing. Not because he had challenged anyone, but because he had refused the role someone else had chosen for him. Across the room, Wade picked up the commissary form and slowly tore it in half. "Leon, watch without speaking." Marcus looked toward the thin strip of Virginia sky beyond the reinforced glass. He had survived places where every sound could carry meaning. This place was different. Here, the hardest thing might not be recognizing danger. It might be refusing to become what other people expected danger to make him. By late afternoon, Marcus had learned that prison routines did not eliminate uncertainty. They merely gave it a schedule. The unit had recreation after 3:30, and men drifted between the dayroom, telephones, showers, and a small outdoor yard enclosed by brick walls and chain-link fencing. Marcus chose the yard. The August air was heavy, nearly 90 degrees, but after hours beneath fluorescent lights, even humid Virginia heat felt honest. He walked the perimeter at an easy pace, passing a basketball court, 2 metal tables, and a patch of worn grass near the fence. Raymond, the older inmate from laundry, was sitting alone at one table with a chessboard between his elbows. "You play?" Raymond asked. Marcus slowed. "A little. That usually means yes." Marcus sat across from him. Raymond turned the board so Marcus had white. First move is yours. They played without conversation for several minutes. Marcus noticed Wade near the basketball court with Nolan and Eric, but he refused to let their presence dictate where he looked. Raymond moved a bishop. You have made yourself interesting. Was not my intention. Intentions do not travel as fast as rumors. Marcus moved a pawn. What rumor? Raymond looked at him over the board. That you told Mercer no twice. That qualifies as news. Around here sometimes. Marcus almost smiled. Then people need better hobbies. Raymond laughed quietly. A few moves later, a younger black inmate named Jamal Brooks approached the table carrying a legal envelope. He looked barely 22. Raymond, you know anything about these appeal forms? Raymond shook his head. Asked the counselor. Jamal's shoulders dropped. I did. She told me to request law library time, but I do not understand what this notice means. Marcus kept his attention on the chessboard until Jamal placed the paper on the edge of the table. Can I? Marcus asked. Jamal hesitated, then handed it over. Marcus read only what was visible and avoided opening the sealed documents beneath it. This says you have a filing deadline. It does not say you lost anything today. Take this to the law library and ask them to help you identify the correct form. Do not guess. You a lawyer? No. Marcus returned the notice. That is exactly why you should talk to someone qualified. Jamal nodded slowly. Thanks. When he left, Raymond moved his rook. You always careful with words? Words can cost people. That sounds like experience. Marcus looked at the board. It is. The recreation officer called 10 minutes remaining. Across the yard, Wade separated from Nolan and Eric and walked toward the table. He stopped beside Marcus. You collecting friends now? Marcus did not look up immediately. He studied Raymond's rook, then moved his knight. Playing chess. Wade glanced at Raymond. I was talking to Reed. Raymond leaned back, but said nothing. Marcus finally met Wade's eyes. Then talk. You keep acting like you do not understand how things work. I understand what you have explained. Apparently not. Wade lowered his voice. People pick sides. Marcus looked around the yard. Men were walking, exercising, waiting for telephone time, talking about court dates and families. None of them looked like pieces on Wade's private board. I am not picking a side against you. Wade frowned. Then what are you doing? Living my day. The simplicity of the answer seemed to irritate Wade more than an insult would have. You think you are better than us? Marcus shook his head. No. I think every man here already has enough consequences without borrowing somebody else's. The recreation officer called movement back inside. Marcus stood. Raymond examined the chessboard. Game is unfinished. Tomorrow. Marcus asked. If they let us out. Marcus turned toward the building, but a voice behind him stopped him. Reed. Wade stood beside the empty chess table. You got family? Marcus's expression changed almost imperceptibly. That is not your concern. Wade raised both hands. Just conversation. Then find another subject. Marcus walked inside with Raymond. His pulse had quickened for the first time since arriving. Not from fear for himself. Family was different. At the security desk, Officer Price was sorting passes. Marcus considered reporting the exchange, then stopped. Wade had made no direct threat. Marcus would document it mentally and watch what came next. Upstairs, Leon was waiting beside their cell. Legal call got approved, he said, pointing toward a paper pass on Marcus's desk. Tomorrow morning. Marcus picked it up. For the first time all day, something warmer than caution crossed his face. His attorney represented a path forward, a reminder that this building was not the whole world. Downstairs, Wade watched the upper tier. Marcus folded the pass and placed it beside his identification card. He had spent the day refusing to be owned by fear, anger, or somebody else's rules. Tomorrow, he would begin fighting for his future the same way. Carefully, lawfully, and without surrendering the person he had worked too hard to become. The legal call came at 9:15 the next morning. Officer Price handed Marcus a pass and directed him to a small monitored telephone room near the counselor offices, where a scratched plastic chair sat beneath a notice explaining that ordinary calls could be recorded. Marcus waited until the connection clicked. Marcus. His attorney, Rachel Bennett, sounded tired but focused. I am here. I received the documents you mailed before transfer. I am reviewing the trial record and the surveillance issue we discussed. Marcus lowered his eyes toward the concrete floor. Any movement? Not yet. I do not want to promise you something before I can support it. I need about 10 days. Marcus appreciated that. False hope had always felt crueler than bad news. Take the time. Rachel paused. How is intake? Manageable. That is not what I asked. Marcus almost smiled. I know. He told her about orientation and his law library request, but nothing about Wade. There was nothing legally useful to report yet. Before ending the call, Rachel said, Your sister called my office yesterday. Denise wants to know whether you are all right. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Denise was 3 years younger and had spent most of their childhood pretending she did not need her older brother watching out for her. Tell her I will call when my telephone list clears. I will. When Marcus returned to cell block C, morning recreation had begun. Leon was near the windows reading yesterday's Richmond Times-Dispatch. Good call, he asked. Necessary. Marcus sat beside him. Sometimes those are the good ones. Across the dayroom, Jamal stood at the kiosk trying to submit a law library request. Nolan Briggs leaned nearby, talking quietly to him. Jamal's posture told Marcus more than the conversation did. His shoulders were tight, and he kept looking toward Wade. Marcus stayed seated. He had no intention of becoming the unit's self-appointed protector. Then Jamal walked away from the kiosk without submitting the request. A few minutes later, he passed Marcus's table. Everything okay? Marcus asked. Jamal stopped. Yeah. Marcus waited. Jamal looked toward Nolan, then lowered his voice. They said library slots are limited, and I should let people who have been here longer go first. Leon lowered his newspaper. That is not how legal access works. Jamal swallowed. I do not want trouble. Marcus understood that sentence. It was the same calculation Leon had described at breakfast the previous day. What problems could a person afford? Marcus pointed toward the counselor station. Your deadline does not care who has been here longer. Ask Ms. Alvarez. Jamal hesitated. They will know I did. You are not reporting anybody. You are requesting your own appointment. Jamal looked at Marcus for several seconds, then returned to the kiosk and submitted the request. Nolan watched him. Marcus felt Nolan's attention shift toward his table, but nobody spoke. At lunch, Marcus found an extra apple beside his tray. The kitchen worker, a middle-aged man named Curtis, nodded toward Raymond 2 places ahead. He traded his dessert for it. Marcus caught up with Raymond near the exit. You did not have to do that. Raymond shrugged. You picked up my laundry. Consider us even. Marcus held out the apple. Then take it. Back. Raymond laughed. You really hate owing people. I like knowing the difference between kindness and leverage. Raymond's expression softened. Then keep it. No leverage. Marcus did. It was the smallest exchange imaginable, an apple under institutional lights, yet something about it stayed with him. Back upstairs, he found Wade waiting near the railing. Wade did not block his path. You told Brooks to ignore us. I told him to meet his legal deadline. Same difference. No. Marcus's voice remained quiet. It is not. Wade studied him. You trying to change how this unit works? Marcus looked past him toward Jamal, who was showing Ms. Alvarez his paperwork at the counselor desk. I am trying to get through my own case. Wade stepped aside, but his expression had changed. The amusement was gone. Marcus climbed toward C-214, carrying the apple in one hand. He understood now that the real test was not whether he could endure pressure. He had done that before. The test was whether he could remain decent without allowing decency to be mistaken for permission. Inside the cell, he placed the apple on Leon's desk between them. Half. Leon looked at it, then at Marcus. Thought you hated owing people. Marcus took the plastic knife from their meal kit. This one was given freely. Leon smiled. That makes all the difference. That evening, rain began tapping against the narrow windows of cell block C, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the yard lights beyond the reinforced glass. Marcus sat at the metal desk reading the orientation handbook while Leon worked through a crossword puzzle on the lower bunk. Around 7, an announcement sent several inmates to evening programs. Jamal appeared outside C-214 holding a library pass. They got me in tomorrow morning, he said. Marcus looked up. Good. Jamal lingered. I wanted to say thanks. You submitted a form. You did that yourself. Still. Marcus closed the handbook. Then do something useful with the appointment. Write down your questions before you go. Jamal nodded and left. Leon watched him disappear down the tier. You know what you were doing, right? Reading prison regulations badly? Making people believe they can say no. Marcus leaned back. That should not be remarkable. In here, ordinary things become remarkable. A few minutes later, the unit officer called Marcus for telephone access. His approved list had finally cleared. He walked downstairs and entered his identification number at a wall telephone near the day room. Denise answered on the third ring. Marcus. The sound of his sister's voice changed the room around him. For a moment, the concrete walls seemed farther away. Hey, D. She exhaled hard. Do not hey, D me. I have been calling Rachel for 2 days. I know. Are you okay? Marcus looked through the glass toward the rain. I am adjusting. That is your military answer. It is my brother answer too. Denise went quiet. He could picture her in the small brick house near Forest Hill Avenue, probably standing at the kitchen counter with unopened mail beside her and the old coffee maker their mother had refused to replace. Mom would hate this, Denise said. Mom hated parking tickets. Denise laughed despite herself, and Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Rachel says she is reviewing the surveillance issue. She is. And you still believe the appeal has a chance? Marcus watched Officer Price sorting paperwork at the desk. I believe the process deserves patience. Denise recognized the boundary. All right, then I will be patient enough for both of us. Before the call ended, she said, Marcus, you do not have to protect everybody all the time. He stared at the receiver. Who said I was? I know you. The line disconnected shortly afterward, but her words followed him back toward the stairs. Near the day room, Raymond was struggling with a laundry cart whose front wheel had turned sideways. Marcus stopped automatically. Hold it steady. He crouched beside the wheel, then noticed a strip of fabric wrapped around the axle. He pulled it free and rotated the caster. Try it. Raymond pushed. The cart rolled straight. Navy teach you laundry repair? Marcus smiled. Navy teaches you that broken equipment does not care about your job description. From behind them came Wade's voice. There it is again. Marcus stood. Wade was alone this time, holding a cup of coffee. What? Everybody's helper. Marcus wiped dust from his fingers. The wheel was stuck. Brooks gets library time. Raymond gets his cart fixed. Harris gets company. You building yourself a little team? Marcus looked at Wade carefully. Something underneath the sarcasm felt less like confidence than concern. No team. Then why keep getting involved? Marcus considered giving him another short answer. Instead, he said, because helping somebody does not put them beneath me. Wade's expression changed. Only slightly. That how you think this place works? That is how I work. The rain rattled harder against the windows. Wade looked toward Raymond, then back at Marcus. People take advantage of that. Sometimes. And you are fine with it. Marcus shook his head. Kindness and permission are not the same thing. For once, Wade had no immediate reply. Officer Price called for evening count, ending the conversation before either man could turn it into something larger. Upstairs, Marcus stood beside his bunk while names were checked. Across the tier, Wade stood outside his own cell waiting for the officer to pass. Their eyes met briefly across 40 feet of concrete and steel. Marcus saw no friendship there, no apology, no sudden transformation. Only hesitation. It was small enough that anyone else might have missed it. Marcus did not. He had learned long ago that the first change in a person rarely arrived as words. Sometimes it was simply the moment certainty stopped being certain. Morning arrived gray and damp, with yesterday's rain still clinging to the narrow windows and collecting in shallow puddles across the recreation yard. After breakfast, Marcus returned to C. 214 and found Leon sitting unusually still on the lower bunk, one hand pressed against his forehead. You all right? Marcus asked. Just dizzy. Leon tried to stand, then immediately sat again. Marcus noticed the untouched breakfast carton beside him. How long? Since before chow. Did you tell medical? Leon waved him off. It will pass. Marcus crouched several feet away, keeping his voice calm. Leon, I am not diagnosing you. I am asking whether you told somebody. No. Then we tell somebody. Leon frowned. I do not need a production. Good. Neither do I. Marcus stepped to the cell entrance and called Officer Price. Within minutes, Price contacted medical and had Leon escorted to the clinic for evaluation. There was no panic, no crowd gathering. Just routine procedure handled the way routine procedure was supposed to be handled. Before leaving, Leon looked back at Marcus. You are annoying. Marcus nodded. I have references. By mid-morning, Marcus received his law library pass. The library occupied a quiet room beyond the education corridor, with shelves of worn legal volumes, several computer terminals, and laminated instructions taped beside the printers. Jamal was already there, hunched over a worksheet with 3 different forms spread in front of him. He looked up. They showed me where the deadline is. Good. I almost missed it by 11 days. Marcus pulled out a chair at another terminal. Then you did not miss it. For the next hour, Marcus focused on his own case. He reviewed dates, copied citations Rachel had asked him to locate, and wrote questions in careful block letters. His past had taught him to separate emotion from information when information mattered. Facts first, assumptions later. When the session ended, Jamal walked beside him toward the unit. Can I ask you something? You just did. Jamal smiled. Why are you so calm? Marcus considered the question. I am not always calm. Could have fooled me. Being afraid and acting afraid are different things. Jamal nodded slowly. Were you military? Marcus glanced at him. Navy. What did you do? My job. Jamal laughed. Man, you really do not tell anybody anything. Some things belong to the past. Back in cell block C, Nolan was waiting near the water fountain. Eric stood several feet away, but Wade was nowhere nearby. Nolan looked at Jamal. Library useful? Jamal stopped. Marcus did too, but remained silent. Yeah, Jamal answered. Good. Nolan's tone made the words sound like a question. You getting advice from Reed now? Jamal glanced at Marcus. Marcus deliberately looked away. This answer had to belong to Jamal. I asked the library staff, Jamal said. It is my case. Nolan stared at him for a moment, then shrugged and walked off. Jamal released a breath. You could have said something. You did not need me to. That seemed to surprise him more than intervention would have. Later, Leon returned from medical carrying a small paper bag and instructions to increase fluids. Dehydrated, he announced. Apparently coffee is not water, which feels like government overreach. Marcus laughed. You planning to appeal? Immediately. Raymond joined them near the windows, and for 10 quiet minutes the 4 men talked about ordinary things. Richmond traffic, bad cafeteria biscuits, whether the Washington football team would disappoint everyone again that season. Nothing about alliances. Nothing about debts. Just conversation. Across the day room, Marcus noticed Wade sitting alone. Nolan approached him and spoke quietly. Wade's eyes moved toward Marcus, then toward Jamal. His jaw tightened. Nolan seemed to expect something. Wade finally shook his head. Nolan looked surprised. Marcus could not hear the exchange, but he recognized disagreement when he saw it. A few minutes later, Wade walked toward the stairs and past Marcus's table. He slowed. Harris okay? Marcus looked up. Dehydrated. Medical cleared him. Wade nodded once. Good. Then he continued upstairs. Leon watched him go. That was new. Marcus looked through the window at sunlight beginning to break through the clouds. Maybe. He refused to turn one decent question into redemption. People were more complicated than single moments. Still, something had shifted. Not because Marcus had defeated anyone or forced anyone to respect him. He had simply refused to surrender his dignity while making room for other men to keep theirs. And somewhere inside Wade Mercer, resistance had begun to compete with recognition. : writing variant equals document ID equals 64192, title equals part 8. The following afternoon, the recreation yard reopened under a washed blue sky, and Marcus found Raymond already setting up the chessboard at their usual metal table. You still owe me a finished game, Raymond said. Marcus sat across from him. I remember. Leon stayed inside on medical advice, and Jamal had another library appointment. So for once Marcus welcomed the quiet. Raymond moved a pawn. Mercer has been different today. Marcus answered with his own move. Different is not necessarily changed. Fair. They played for several minutes before Wade appeared beside the table. He was alone. Mind if I watch? Raymond raised an eyebrow. Free country. Wade looked around at the fences. Poor choice of words. Even Marcus smiled at that. Wade remained standing while the game continued. Eventually he said, Reed, can I ask you something? You can ask. Nolan says you were more than regular Navy. Marcus's hand stopped above his bishop. Nolan says a lot. He heard somebody in laundry talking. Said you were special operations. Marcus placed the bishop down. My military record is not relevant here. Wade studied him. That means yes. It means exactly what I said. Wade pulled out the empty chair and sat. For once there was no performance in him. My brother was Army. Fort Campbell. Came home different. Marcus looked at him more carefully. When, 2011, Wade rubbed his thumb against a scratch in the tabletop. Afghanistan. He never talked about much. Then I stopped asking. Marcus knew that silence. Families sometimes believe questions open doors, while veterans sometimes experience them as demands to reopen rooms they had spent years trying to close. Maybe he did not know how to explain it, Marcus said. Wade nodded faintly. Maybe I did not know how to listen. Raymond quietly moved another piece, allowing the conversation to remain ordinary. Marcus appreciated that. Wade looked toward the basketball court. You know why I started doing this? Doing what? Making sure new guys understood who they could deal with. Marcus waited. Wade exhaled. My first month here, I trusted somebody. Cost me commissary, phone time, and 6 months of thinking everybody wanted something. Marcus did not excuse what Wade had done afterward. Understanding was not the same as approval. So you decided nobody would put you in that position again. Something like that. And eventually, you started putting other people in it. Wade's face hardened for an instant. Marcus expected him to leave. Instead, he looked down. You always talk like that. Only when somebody asks. Raymond concealed a smile behind his hand. The yard officer announced 15 minutes remaining. Then Nolan and Eric entered through the recreation gate. Nolan noticed Wade sitting with Marcus and stopped. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation. He walked over. What is this? Wade leaned back. Chess. You do not play chess. I am watching. Nolan looked directly at Marcus. You got everybody sitting around like this is some kind of counseling group. Marcus felt the old instinct rise. Assess the distance, watch the hands, control the breathing. He let the instinct pass without obeying it. Nobody asked you to join, Marcus said calmly. But nobody is stopping you either. Nolan stared at him. You think being polite makes you untouchable? Marcus met his eyes. No one is untouchable. The answer removed the challenge Nolan seemed to want. Wade stood. Leave it alone, Nolan. The yard became strangely quiet around them. Nolan looked at Wade. You serious? I said leave it alone. There was no threat in Wade's voice, only a decision. Nolan shook his head and walked toward the opposite side of the yard with Eric following him. Wade remained beside the table, visibly uncomfortable with what he had just done. Marcus did not thank him. Gratitude would have made it sound like Wade had protected him. What mattered was simpler. Wade had chosen not to participate in something wrong. Raymond looked at the board. Your move, Marcus. Marcus studied the pieces. Actually, it is Wade's. Wade blinked. Marcus stood and offered him the chair. You have been watching long enough. Wade hesitated before sitting. Raymond turned the board toward him. The recreation officer called 10 minutes. Marcus walked toward the fence and looked through the chain links at a strip of wet grass beyond the perimeter. Nobody had apologized. Nobody had suddenly become a different man. But a line had moved. Sometimes change did not arrive with speeches or promises. Sometimes it began when one person finally refused to keep repeating yesterday. Before we continue, if you enjoy inspiring stories about courage, second chances, and people who choose kindness when it matters most, subscribe to Narralight. Our stories remind us that one decision, one voice, or one act of compassion can change a life forever. Now, let's see. The next morning, Marcus noticed the empty seat before he noticed Wade. Nolan's usual chair near the dayroom television remained unoccupied through breakfast movement, and Eric sat by himself with a paper cup between his hands. Nobody explained anything. Prison units had their own weather, and Marcus had learned not to mistake every cloud for a storm. He returned from breakfast with Leon and found Wade standing near the counselor station, waiting to speak with Ms. Alvarez. That is unusual, Leon murmured. What is? Mercer asking staff for something instead of arranging it himself. Marcus kept walking. Maybe he needs a form. You have an answer for everything. Mostly boring answers. An hour later, Officer Price posted the morning movement list. Marcus had law library access again. Jamal was scheduled too. As they waited near the unit door, Wade approached carrying a folded sheet of paper. Read. Marcus turned. Wade held out the paper, but stopped before handing it over. You know anything about reentry programs? Not enough to advise you. Figures. Wade looked embarrassed by the question. My release review is coming up. I have a daughter in Fredericksburg. She is 14 now. Marcus said nothing. Wade continued because the silence gave him room. Her mother lets me write. My daughter has not answered in 8 months. The swagger Marcus had first seen at the dayroom table was absent. Wade looked like a tired man holding a form he did not understand. Ms. Alvarez can help with approved reentry planning, Marcus said. Employment, housing, family services. Ask her what applies to your release status. Wade looked at the counselor station. I already did. Good. That is all you have. Marcus almost smiled. What were you expecting? I do not know. One of those speeches. I do not give speeches. Jamal coughed too. Had a laugh. Wade looked down at the paper. My brother used to say I could turn embarrassment into anger faster than anybody he knew. Marcus remembered their conversation in the yard. Sounds like he knew you. Yeah. Wade folded the paper again. Maybe too well. At the library, Marcus returned to his case file. Rachel had sent a legal memo through approved attorney correspondence identifying a question about the timing of evidence disclosed before trial. Marcus read each page twice. Nothing promised freedom. Nothing erased the conviction. But there was something concrete for Rachel to examine, and concrete things could be worked on. Across the room, Jamal filled out his filing paperwork. Deadline. Marcus asked quietly. 3 days early. Better than 11 days late. Jamal smiled and returned to writing. When they came back to cell block C, the atmosphere had changed. Nolan was there now, speaking sharply with Wade near the stairs. Marcus could not hear everything, only fragments. Making us look weak, Nolan said. Wade answered quietly. There is no us if all you mean is making people afraid to say no. Nolan glanced toward Marcus. For a moment Marcus understood exactly what was happening. His presence had become an excuse for a disagreement that had probably existed long before he arrived. He walked toward them. Leave my name out of this. Nolan turned. Nobody asked you. Then stop looking at me when you argue. Wade stared at Marcus, surprised. Marcus continued. Whatever changed between you two belongs to you two. I am not interested in taking Wade's place, starting a group, or proving anything. Nolan's expression shifted. You expect me to believe that? You do not have to. Marcus looked around the dayroom. But I came here with one case, one family, and one life to get back to. I am not building a kingdom inside a place I am trying to leave. Silence settled around them. Even Wade seemed struck by the sentence. Marcus walked upstairs without waiting for a response. Later, during afternoon count, Leon stood beside the lower bunk and said, You know what people are finally figuring out about you? Marcus kept his eyes toward the door as Officer Price approached. That I am terrible company? That you could have made this about power, and you did not. Marcus looked across the tier. Wade stood outside his cell with his identification card ready. Nolan stood farther down, alone. Marcus thought about the men he had served beside years earlier, and about how quickly authority became dangerous when someone needed it to feel important. Power is easy to misunderstand, Marcus said. Leon glanced up. Meaning? Officer Price called Marcus's name. Here, Marcus answered, then waited until the officer moved on. Only then did he finish. If the only way you know you have it is when somebody else feels smaller, you never had much to begin with. The trouble came the following afternoon, not with shouting, but with a missing envelope. Marcus returned from the law library shortly before 3 and found Wade standing outside C-214 with Officer Price. Leon sat on the lower bunk, his crossword untouched. What happened? Marcus asked. Price answered first. Mercer reported approved legal correspondence missing from his property after morning recreation. Marcus looked at Wade. The reentry papers? Wade nodded. And 2 letters from my daughter. His voice was controlled, but Marcus recognized what sat underneath it. Anger was trying to make the decision before reason could. Price explained that Wade had already submitted a property complaint and that staff would review the matter under facility procedure. Until then, Price said, nobody handles this themselves. Understood. Wade stared down the tier. Understood. After Price left, Wade said, Nolan knew those letters mattered. Marcus felt the direction of the accusation immediately. Knowing is not proof. He was near my cell. Still not proof. Wade looked at him sharply. You think I should just sit around? I think you already reported it. Let the process work. Wade gave a humorless laugh. You really believe every process works? Marcus thought of his conviction, Rachel's legal memo, and the appeal he was building one careful page at a time. No, he said. I believe failing systems do not become fairer because we make reckless decisions inside them. Wade looked away. For several seconds, only the ventilation system filled the silence. "Those are the last letters she sent me," he said. The anger in his face weakened, revealing something more vulnerable. One was from Christmas. She drew a little tree in the corner because she knew they would not let her send glitter. Marcus understood then that Wade was not protecting paper. He was protecting evidence that somewhere outside these walls, he was still somebody's father. "Then do not make today the reason she stops writing forever," Marcus said. Wade looked back at him. "What is that supposed to mean? Your release review is coming. You told me that yourself. Whatever you do next becomes part of the man who walks into that review." Wade's jaw tightened. "Easy for you to say." Marcus felt the words land. "No," he replied quietly. "It is not." Wade studied him, and Marcus continued. "I have spent every morning here thinking about one bad decision, one courtroom, and one family waiting for answers. I know exactly how expensive a moment can become." Wade's shoulders lowered slightly. Before he could respond, a commotion of voices rose near the laundry area downstairs. No violence, only several men arguing over a canvas cart that had been moved from the wrong tier. Raymond appeared at the stairwell holding a stack of folded uniforms. "Mercer," he called. "You missing an envelope?" Wade descended quickly, Marcus following several steps behind. Raymond reached beneath the folded clothing and produced a large manila envelope. "Found this wedged behind the lower shelf on cart 6. Must have gotten mixed in when laundry pickup came through." Wade took it with both hands. He opened the flap immediately. The reentry documents were there. So were the 2 letters. He unfolded one just enough to see handwriting and a small green Christmas tree drawn in the corner. Wade closed his eyes. Marcus said nothing. Neither did Raymond. A minute later, Nolan entered from the day room and noticed the envelope. Wade looked at him. Marcus could almost see the old habit returning, the instinct to defend pride by pretending the accusation had never mattered. Instead, Wade walked across the floor. "Nolan." Nolan stopped. "What?" Wade swallowed. "I thought you took something from my cell." Nolan's face hardened. "I did not." "I know." Wade looked down at the envelope. Laundry had it. The room seemed unusually quiet. Wade could have ended there. Instead, he forced out the harder words. "I was wrong." Nolan stared at him. "You were ready to blame me." "Yeah." Wade did not defend himself. "I was." Nolan walked away without forgiving him, but Wade did not chase after him or turn the moment into another contest. Marcus watched him return to the stairs carrying his daughter's letters against his chest. "Read," Wade said quietly. Marcus looked over. "You knew I was wrong. I knew you did not know enough to be right." Wade nodded. That evening, Marcus found him at the metal table writing a letter on lined paper. No audience surrounded him. No one owed him anything. Wade simply bent over the page, carefully forming each word beneath the fluorescent light, trying to repair a relationship beyond the walls before another impulsive choice could cost him the chance. The letter Wade wrote to his daughter was still on the metal table the next morning when Marcus came downstairs for breakfast movement. Wade sat beside it with a stamped envelope, reading the page again as if every sentence had to survive inspection before he could let it leave his hands. Marcus would have walked past, but Wade looked up. "You ever write something and realize sorry sounds smaller on paper?" Marcus stopped. "Sometimes sorry is supposed to feel small." Wade frowned. "That's supposed to help?" "No." Marcus nodded toward the envelope. "But sending it might." Wade folded the letter and sealed it. At breakfast, Nolan sat across the chow hall with Eric. He never looked toward Wade. Marcus ate quietly beside Leon until Officer Price entered and called his name. "Reed, counselor wants you after meal." Marcus's stomach tightened. Ms. Alvarez was waiting in her office with a printed message slip. "Your attorney requested an expedited legal call." Marcus read Rachel Bennett's name twice. "Did she say why?" "Only that it concerns your pending case." 20 minutes later, Marcus heard Rachel's voice through the telephone. "We found something." He gripped the receiver more firmly. "Tell me." The prosecution's disclosure log lists surveillance footage from a convenience store across from the parking lot. The timestamp places your vehicle away from the location during part of the window the state relied on at trial. I am filing the appropriate motion to have the court review the evidence and the disclosure issue. Marcus stared at the painted cinderblock wall. He wanted certainty. Rachel did not offer it. Does that change the conviction? Not today. The court decides what happens next. But this is significant enough that I wanted you to hear it from me. Marcus closed his eyes. For months, people had told him to stay hopeful. Hope had felt abstract. A timestamp was different. A record existed. Something measurable had survived. "Thank you," he said. Rachel's voice softened. "Do not thank me yet. We still have work." Then we work. When Marcus returned to the unit, Wade was standing near the mail collection box. "You look different," Wade said. "Attorney found evidence worth reviewing." "Good news." "Potentially." Wade nodded. "I hope it is." Marcus could have continued upstairs. Instead, he noticed Wade still holding the sealed letter. "You mailing that?" Wade looked at it. "Trying to." "What is stopping you?" Wade rubbed the edge of the envelope. "What if she does not answer?" Marcus thought about Denise waiting beside a telephone in Richmond, about Rachel refusing to promise what she could not guarantee, about Jamal filing paperwork before a deadline because uncertainty was not the same as defeat. "Then you will have told the truth without controlling what comes back." Wade looked toward the mail slot. "I was not a good father before I came here." Marcus did not rescue him from the admission. "Then do not pretend you were." Wade looked surprised. "That is your advice? Tell her what you did wrong. Tell her what you are doing differently. Do not ask her to make you feel better about either one." For a long moment, Wade stared at the envelope. Then he slid it through the slot. The sound was almost nothing, paper brushing metal, but Wade remained there afterward with his empty hand resting against the box. Later that afternoon, Marcus found Nolan alone near the windows. Nolan looked at him and said, "Mercer thinks you changed him." Marcus shook his head. "I did not change Wade. He stopped doing things our way after you showed up." "Then maybe your way was already costing him more than he wanted to pay." Nolan's expression hardened, but Marcus did not push. "You could have embarrassed him yesterday," Nolan said. "After that envelope turned up." "Why would I?" "Because he was wrong." Marcus looked across the room. Wade was helping Raymond straighten the stubborn wheel on the laundry cart, following Raymond's instructions rather than taking over. Being wrong is embarrassing enough if a person is willing to admit it. Nolan followed Marcus's gaze. Something uncertain crossed his face. "You really believe people change?" Marcus thought about the trident he had earned years ago, the conviction he was challenging now, and the man he was trying to remain between those two truths. "I believe people choose," he said. "Then they choose again tomorrow." Nolan said nothing. Near the mailbox, the outgoing letters waited for collection, including one from a father who could not rewrite yesterday. Marcus understood that better than Wade knew. Justice might restore what had been taken from him, or the court might disappoint him again. He could not control that morning's ruling, Wade's daughter, Nolan's choices, or anybody else's judgment. He could control what kind of man uncertainty met when it came looking for him. 2 mornings later, Officer Price called Marcus from breakfast before he had finished his coffee. "Read, legal call. Counselor's office." Marcus set down the paper cup and followed without asking questions. Rachel Bennett was already waiting when the line connected. "The court scheduled an evidentiary hearing," she said. Marcus rested one hand against the edge of the desk. "When?" 3 weeks. The judge ordered preservation of the surveillance file and directed the Commonwealth to respond to our motion. Marcus absorbed each word carefully. "So nothing is overturned." "Correct. This is not a release order, but the court is taking the issue seriously." "That is enough for today." Rachel paused. "Your sister asked me to tell you she is proud of how you are handling this." Marcus looked toward the narrow office window. "Denise always talks too much. She said you would say that." For the first time since arriving, Marcus laughed during a legal call. When he returned to cell block C, he did not announce the news. Leon noticed anyway. Something happened. Marcus sat beside him. The judge scheduled a hearing. Leon lowered his newspaper. "That sounds like something. It is a door opening. Not the same as walking through it." Raymond joined them before lunch, and Jamal arrived carrying confirmation that his filing had been accepted. Within minutes, the conversation became something Marcus had not expected to find inside a correctional unit. For men quietly comparing small pieces of forward movement. Jamal had protected his deadline. Wade had submitted his reentry paperwork. Marcus had a hearing. Raymond had received approval for a vocational maintenance class beginning the following month. None of it was miraculous. That made it matter more. Later, Wade approached Marcus near the windows holding a white envelope. His face looked different before he spoke. She wrote back. Marcus knew immediately who he meant. "Your daughter." Wade nodded. "Mail came this morning. You read it?" 3 times. Wade looked down at the envelope. "She said she is still angry." Marcus waited. She said she does not trust promises anymore. Wade swallowed. But she said I can keep writing. Marcus nodded slowly. That sounds honest. I wanted more. Of course you did. Wade looked toward the floor. Old me would have gotten mad about that. And today I think she gets to decide how fast she trusts me. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. That sounds like progress. Across the room, Nolan sat alone. Wade noticed him too. After several seconds, he walked over. Marcus remained where he was. Whatever happened next belonged to Wade. Nolan, Wade said. Nolan looked up cautiously. What? Wade pulled out the chair opposite him, but did not sit. I owe you an apology. Nolan glanced toward Marcus. Wade immediately said, Do not look at Reed. This is me. Nolan looked back. Wade continued. I accused you because it was easier than admitting I was scared those letters were gone. That was wrong. Nolan remained quiet. You expect everything to be fine now? No. Wade's answer came quickly. I expect you to decide what you want to do with the apology. Nolan studied him, then nodded toward the chair. Sit down. Wade sat. No handshake followed. No dramatic reconciliation. They simply began talking in voices too low for Marcus to hear. Leon appeared beside Marcus. You did that. Marcus shook his head. No. Come on. Wade did that. Leon looked unconvinced. Marcus continued. If I take credit for his better choices, I would have to take responsibility for his bad ones. They belonged to him. Near the officer's station, Price was distributing afternoon passes. Jamal headed toward the law library. Raymond pushed his repaired laundry cart, without the wheel catching once. Wade sat across from Nolan, listening more than speaking. Marcus watched all of it under the same fluorescent lights that had felt so cold on his first day. He remembered the folded note pushed beneath his cell door and the demand to appear after count. Wade had once tried to decide where Marcus belonged. Now Wade was learning something harder. Dignity could not be collected like commissary, borrowed through fear, or taken from somebody else. Marcus had never needed to defeat him. He had only needed to remain himself long enough for Wade to see another way. Officer Price called Marcus's name and handed him a legal pass confirming the hearing preparation session. Marcus folded it carefully beside his identification card. Justice was not finished with him yet. Neither was life. But for the first time since those steel doors had closed behind him, the future no longer felt like something happening somewhere else. 3 weeks later, Marcus woke before the lights came on. For several minutes, he remained on the upper bunk listening to the ventilation system and Leon breathing below him. The evidentiary hearing was scheduled for that morning. Nothing about the cell looked different. Yet Marcus felt every familiar object with unusual clarity. The folded blanket, the metal desk, the legal papers stacked beneath his identification card. You awake? Leon asked. Yeah. Good luck today. Marcus climbed down. I will take good preparation instead. Leon smiled. That sounds like you. After breakfast, Officer Price escorted Marcus to the attorney visitation area, where Rachel Bennett met him behind reinforced glass with a binder of records. The hearing itself was conducted by secure video with the circuit court. Rachel presented the surveillance timestamp and the disclosure history. The Commonwealth requested additional review rather than contesting the authenticity of the preserved file. Marcus listened without trying to turn every sentence into a prediction. Then the judge spoke. The court found that the evidence raised substantial questions requiring further proceedings and ordered Marcus's conviction set aside pending the Commonwealth's decision on whether to retry the case. Rachel turned toward him, eyes bright but controlled. Marcus, do you understand what the judge ordered? He did, but for a second he could not answer. Months of courtrooms, paperwork, waiting, and explaining himself had compressed into a silence so complete he could hear his own breathing. Yes, he finally said. Administrative processing took hours. By late afternoon, Marcus returned briefly to C-214 to collect his property while release paperwork was completed. Leon stood when he entered. Well, Marcus held up the property bag. Leon stared at it, then smiled. About time. Raymond and Jamal were waiting downstairs. Jamal shook Marcus's hand. My filing got a response yesterday. They are reviewing it. Keep every deadline, Marcus told him. I will. Raymond nodded toward the clear bag. Not much luggage. Marcus looked at the 2 uniforms and the few possessions that had defined his days there. Enough. Wade stood several feet away, uncertain whether to approach. Marcus walked to him instead. Your daughter's still writing? Every week. Wade reached into his pocket and showed him the corner of an envelope without removing it. She might visit next month. Then be the man you told her you were trying to become. Wade looked down. I owe you an apology too. Marcus waited. First day you came in, I saw a black man I did not know and decided I could put you in a category before you ever opened your mouth. I treated you like somebody whose dignity was mine to test. The admission hung between them. Wade continued. Then I found out about the Navy. About what you did before here. Former Navy SEAL. Marcus's expression remained calm. That is not why you were wrong. Wade looked up. Marcus said, you were wrong before you knew anything about me. Wade absorbed that quietly. Yeah. Marcus nodded toward the other men in the unit. Nobody should need a resume, a uniform, money, or a title before you decide they deserve basic respect. Wade swallowed. I understand that now. Then remember it when the next new man walks through that door. Officer Price called Marcus from the security desk. Release processing was ready. Marcus said goodbye without ceremony. Outside the final secured entrance, evening sunlight spread across the parking lot. Denise stood beside a blue Honda Accord, both hands covering her mouth. Marcus stopped. For the first time in weeks, there was no reinforced glass between him and someone who loved him. Denise crossed the distance and wrapped her arms around him. Marcus closed his eyes. He had spent years learning endurance, discipline, and control. But standing beneath an ordinary Virginia sky, he understood that strength had never been about making another person smaller. It was the ability to keep your dignity without stealing theirs, to demand justice without surrendering compassion, and to leave room for people to become better than the worst thing they had done. Behind him, steel doors closed. Ahead, Denise opened the passenger door. Marcus took one slow breath of warm evening air and walked toward home. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Narralight for more powerful stories that remind us to look beyond appearances, challenge prejudice, and never underestimate the impact of doing what's right. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage creates the biggest change. Thank you for watching. Remember, the world changes one choice at a time. We'll see you in the next story.